there, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm going to be doing a little mini class today called Tarot for 2025. I've tried in the past to do one of these for almost every year around New Year's to explain the tarot numerology of the year, which is quite simple to calculate for any year in a very similar way to a process that I teach for calculating your birth numerology, and that is by taking the cross sum of the year. From this cross sum, we can arrive at a number for each and every year that corresponds to a major arcana card of the tarot. And we can also correlate that to a cross sum in the major arcana, or sometimes two cross sums that all have what we call a cross sum relationship. From this card or two cards or even three cards, you can really get a sense through that interpretation of the energy of the year that's going to be coming our way. And from this, just like any good forecast, you can know what to expect and not only sort of tailor your own personal expectations to what is in store, but you can really leverage what you know from that forecast to really create for yourself a really rewarding year that at the end of the year is worth celebrating. So the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to look back on 2024, and we're going to explore a little bit about the tarot numerology that was at play for all of us in 2024 and see what we make of that. And we're all, I promise you, all of us are going to find something there to celebrate and acknowledge and find the positive and what was really worthwhile and really helped us grow in 2024. And from there, we're going to go ahead and look into 2025. So let's go on now to a little bit of exploration of what was going on for all of us in 2024. So as you can see at the top of this slide, we've got a little bit of a calculation on, and this just is very simply illustrating how to get the cross sum, which gives you the number of the year. So 2024, just like any year that we would calculate a cross sum for, breaks down to 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 4. You add all those numbers up and you get the number 8. So 8 in the tarot's major arcana most commonly these days corresponds to the number that you will see on a tarot card, which is usually called strength. Now, various decks sometimes rename the tarot cards. Some alternative names that I have seen in the place of the word strength call this number 8 archetype things like fortitude. That's a more traditional name. Or healing. There's a card numbered 8 in the major arcana in the Medicine Woman Tarot, which is called healing. Sometimes this card has real resonance with themes of balancing different sorts of energy, and you can really see that at play in the imagery that I've got here on the left hand side image, which is the imagery from the Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot, where we see a female, feminine figure with a lemniscate infinity symbol over her head, and she's sort of bending down, and it nearly looks like she's petting the lion in this picture, right? Or she's befriending the lion. If you sort of soften your gaze and you look at the garland around her neck and you look at the lion's mane, you can just about discern a second lemniscate, a second figure 8 in the pattern that sort of weaves between those two parts of the image as well. There are other things, if you look at this image and really study it for any amount of time, which will really start to come and come into your consciousness. and different people see different things. Different people highlight or focus on different things in an image. This is how the tarot becomes so personally powerful for each of us. You know, what we focus on, what we see, what stands out to us might be very different to what stands out for somebody else. But we can, you know, sort of do a meditation on what we are seeing and, you know, really derive a lot of personal meaning from those cards. So I'm not here to tell you what strength, quote unquote, means per se, although we can, you know, sort of talk about some universal themes. So obviously, with the name strength, it is very obvious once you've done this calculation that the year 2024 was a year for strengthening or shoring up or developing that fortitude, or, you know, if you want to look at it in the same way that the Medicine Woman Tarot chooses to look at this, you can also say that this was perhaps a difficult year, but a healing year in a lot of senses. And how is it a healing year? Well, we can look at the languaging of decks that use the word balance in some way playing in here. Well, all of these things had to come into balance in order to give us the stability that would equate to a level of strength or strengthening in our lives. Before I go much further here in really analyzing what was going on in 2024 with that word strength, though, let's look at what is on this slide that we haven't talked about yet. And as you will see, it is there is an alternative card that sometimes is given the number 8. Now, in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, which we see the example of the strength card on the left-hand side here, Rider-Waite-Smith has put justice, which we see on the right-hand side from a different deck here, in the number 11 position. So that's a different take. But older decks, such as the Tarot of Marseille, and even more recent decks like the Crowley and Thoth variants very often still use the number 8 to denote the idea of justice instead of the idea of strength. And you can do a whole study. We can talk for a whole lecture at length on why this switch up was made essentially in 1910 with the introduction of the Rider-Waite-Smith deck and all of the variants that we see in our world. The large majority of them now are sort of inspired by Rider-Waite-Smith. That's a really broad claim, I know, but it does seem to be true, especially in the decks that I have in my own personal collection, and know many people have the same experience. We see a lot of the symbology and the numbering that goes along with strength being connoted and connected to the number 8. However, those older decks with the number 8 connected to justice are also, I think, really important to bear in mind any time that you're looking at the archetype of strength coming up in a tarot reading. Strength and justice are connected. They were connected before this change-up was made by Arthur Edward Waite in 1910. Obviously, that change-up was made because some people were sensing this connection between these two archetypal experiences, these archetypal concepts that our soul journey has to encounter and master at some point, at various points usually in our lives. Strength and justice are very connected. Very often, and this is where I'm going to sort of start talking about my personal experience in 2024. Hopefully, many of you will not be able to relate to a lot of what I had going on personally in 2024, I hope, but I'm sure that it can resonate at the same time. So, for me personally, funnily enough, the number for strength and justice, the number 8, those two concepts of strength and justice were very connected for me personally. In early 2024, very unfortunately, I'm still very sad about this actually. I did have to ask my partner of 8 years, we share two little children together, for a separation. I just felt it was the best thing. It was going to provide our little boys with a much healthier family going forward if we each had our own homes. So separation was something that came up for me, which at first blush, of course, feels like something that, two halves are not generally seen as stronger than one whole family unit, right? So it was an odd thing, in a lot of ways for me to be considering in this year. But the more the year played out, the more the reality became apparent, I suppose, that no, this was a very strengthening move, not only for me, but for the family in general. At the same time, unfortunately, my former partner and father of my little boys, who I am making every effort to stay in an amicable relationship with at present, did, I'm sure, what a lot of men with the resources and means would do when confronted with a separation. Logically, the first thing they do very often is get a lawyer involved, right? So I got this email from an attorney, and then because he had an attorney, I felt like, well, probably the best thing to do then is to get an attorney myself. What an expense! What a palaver, to use a term from my youth in South Wales. But it really was. It just sort of, I didn't want that to happen, but it did. But of course, as soon as the attorneys got involved, what archetypal experience was I actually having in this strengthening year? I was having the experience of going through the court system, navigating the justice system here in the United States, where family law is seen to be not ideal, in fact, rather broken, if you talk to a lot of people. Through this year, which obviously then for me was like, oh, this really is a strength and justice year for me personally. I started thinking about all of the ways that it would actually be so much better if the attorneys weren't doing their thing, because my experience has been you get attorneys involved and all of a sudden things seem to veer from everybody's true sense of what would truly be justice being exercised into the attorneys making things more argumentative, more adversarial, more contentious than they ever should be, especially when there are little children involved. I was given a gift in disguise towards the end of this year of my attorney and a grant via an organization that was advocating for me running out on this attorney. My attorney actually had to withdraw. And rather than losing sleep over that too much, I had this really funny experience when she notified me that she was going to withdraw from the case. She gave me some options. She said, oh, you can come up with this large sum of money and retain me further. And then she sent me a huge email with all of these steps that I would have to go through to represent myself should this issue, which the attorneys had largely created, where there wasn't an issue before they were involved, if you ask me. If it should ever come to trial, if it came to trial and we had a date set for trial in the new year, here are all the things you need to do to represent yourself in court up against his fancy law firm. I didn't lose any sleep over this. I had this intuitive sense that actually all I needed to do, because I knew that the winds of fate were really quite aligned with this being a year that would ultimately end up being a strengthening experience, which would bring us closer to balance and justice and fairness, and really a truly more healthy situation for our children, and probably for ourselves, than, we had started out with. How were we going to get there? Well, I thought it can't be that hard, and I know that, fate is sort of with me on this, because I can align with the energies that are already at play in this year. So I chose to do the easiest thing, which was to reach out directly by myself to advocate for my family with the courts. And what I ended up being able to do, which sort of seemed like a bit of a miracle and very out of left field as far as the attorneys were concerned, because going into this, it seemed like, the whole case was very contentious. What we found out during a resolution conference, a settlement conference, was actually we shared a lot of common ground. We were in agreement about what would actually be best for the children overall, and we came to a full settlement agreement without having to go to trial. So at the end of the day, this really did end up being a very strengthening year that brought us into a more mature sense of balance and fairness and harmony as a family, versus where we had started out. So as I have mentioned, I hope that most of you haven't had a year that was that direct of a tarot lesson in your year. I hope that most of you didn't have to spend an inordinate amount of time and energy in and around the court system this year and leaving partnerships and such. But whatever you've had going on this year, perhaps you have had a similar experience when you look at what is really at the root, the core of this archetypal experience of strength and justice. So you can probably do a little thought about ways that perhaps this year hasn't been the most pleasant. Going in and out of the court system, unless you're an attorney, it's probably not your favourite thing, right? It certainly wasn't mine. I hope I never have to go near a court again in my life after this year. But was it necessary? Probably. Did it leave me stronger leaving this year than I stepped into this year? Absolutely. Of course, other things happened along the way this year that have really helped me to feel stronger at the end of this year than going into this year. I now have my own home. I'm not beholden to anyone else for any part of my life, my existence, what I need in my life. It's all based on my own decisions and my own power and my own livelihood, making every part of my life work. So it's been a year where I've obviously gained a lot of independence. That's not a bad thing. That was a very strengthening thing for me. So, hopefully, not that I wish that any of you had to go through a separation and the court system to make this happen for yourself, but if you can focus on the ways that this year has really made you stronger, that is, I think, one of the best ways to leave this year in gratitude and celebration. You see it all over social media. I'm sure for many of you in your social lives, outside of, social media feeds. I'm just, relating to social media because obviously I've had a lot of time to myself this year, but obviously this is obviously where I'm going to be posting this video as well as on social media. But this happens, in social situations generally, you'll hear people at the end of a year saying things like, "Oh, good riddance." I saw a post just a few hours ago. I'm recording this on New Year's Eve. That said something like, "Oh, it's traditional to old Irish custom, you open the door to let the old year out and let the new year in." And someone said, "Well, let's open all the doors and all the windows. Let's just crack them all open and get this year out as quickly and as completely as possible, because it's been horrible." I don't recommend that you ever leave any experience in your life, let alone an entire year in your life, without acknowledging, yes, absolutely acknowledge the difficulties of the year, the sadness of the year, the grief of the year. I lost two of my children's grandparents, one of my own grandparents, my children's grandmother, and my stepmother, my children's grandmother. Both died in 2024. There's an immense amount of grief there for me. Am I going to focus on that and colour and label the whole year as horrible and good riddance? No, that was 365 days of my life, of your life. Please do everything you can to leave this year in gratitude and celebration. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't acknowledge the grief, you shouldn't acknowledge the hard parts of the year, but it does mean if you can find something, and very often looking at the archetypes that were at play in this year can help you to find something that ultimately did end up being a positive. And in this year it was things that felt like you leaned closer into justice, you got a strengthening experience, it was fortifying and balancing and healing in some ways. Focus on how this year helped you towards those archetypal ends, and in that you can find something usually to celebrate. Right, I have gone on and on and on about the archetypes that have been at play for us in 2024 for nearly 20 minutes. Just 20 minutes right now. So I think I'm going to have to leave it there. Obviously, we can have a deeper conversation about this if you want to process something and you want to book a session with me. I'd be happy to do more personalized takes on 2024 and 2025 individually. But let's go on now and look at what is in store for us all in 2025. Right, so let's do our cross-sum calculation for the year 2025. 2025 breaks down to 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 5, which equals 9. 9 is usually, in decks, both modern and older decks, equated to the archetype of the Hermit. This is an archetype that is most traditionally called the Hermit, but it has other names in different decks. I can think of one deck that calls it aloneness or solitude. Other decks that call it inner wisdom. And you can sort of see this symbolically in the Hermit card that I've got on the screen here, which is the Rider-Waite-Smith variant of the Hermit, illustrated by Pamela Coleman Smith in 1910. This is the basic imagery that you will find at play in many, many, many decks that have been inspired by or use the imagery and philosophy of Rider-Waite-Smith decks as their foundation. That would be most of my decks today, use this imagery. You see a man cloaked in grey in a very grey background. He's holding a staff. His gaze is bent down, so he's looking down. He's looking almost within, right? in yoga. I will very often instruct my yoga students in forward bends to sort of finish the pose off by tucking their chin into their chest. And this position, this physical position, allows for introspection, right? And you can see he's lifting a light in a lantern. There is a light in the lantern that he's lifting himself. So the message that we have overall in this card visually is: to thine own self be true, shine a light for yourself. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. All of these ideas come to mind when we see this card visually, right? There is only one figure in this card. In the tarot overall, in the 78 images that make up an entire deck, a 78 card deck of tarot, we have lots of different experiences, lots of different interactions. A number of the cards, feature more than one figure. But the Hermit stands alone. And he stands in a barren, wintry sort of landscape. It looks like he might be on top of a mountain, even. So, this brings to mind the idea of a wise old man that we find in so many fairy tales and mythologies from all over the world. This idea that a wizened solitude, or going on a quest to find someone who lives in that solitude is a source of wisdom, and wisdom seeking. So the Hermit, numerologically, of course, the 9 comes after the 8, which is the experience of strength or justice. How many people was I just talking about that were involved in 2024 with me? There were so many people. I mean, I am so ready, and many of you may also be, for a year of a little bit more withdrawal, maybe. A little bit more me time would be good. Personally, after separating, and then, inadvertently, of course, the courts getting involved in my separation with 2 little boys, I ended up being a single mother without any help at all from the other parent for 9 months of the year. That was really hard. I had to enroll my 3-year-old in preschool. I had my 5-year-old in kindergarten. I had a number of income streams and jobs that I do myself, which involve interacting with a whole other lot of people. There wasn't just the court stuff going on, where there were all these interpersonal interactions going on. There were interactions at 2 schools, 4 streams of income and jobs, and I was doing it all by myself. So as you can imagine, with a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, that meant very little time on my own. When I did have time that I could carve out some space, I very often felt obligated to spend it with my adult children, who are 20 and 23 now. So the idea of solitude was just nowhere in my year. It just did not exist. So 2025, a much less interactive year. A year where perhaps looking within for wisdom and doing more personal development is going to be very, very welcome. The Hermit as an energy for the year is going to be a good thing for many of us to remind ourselves of from time to time. So if you had the challenges of 2024 play out and you're going, right, I'm stronger in all these ways now. My life feels more fair and balanced in these ways now. One thing that very often we can feel ready for before we're actually ready is, okay, I've got all that done. Now it's ready. Now it's time for me to go on this adventure. Not so fast. The year's energies, being the energies of the Hermit, might sort of backfire or seemingly even sabotage any plans that you have for 2025 to be too much of an outward seeking year. One example in my own life, and this has been difficult to acknowledge, but when I really check in about it, it feels so right to be reconsidering this, is that in the settlement that I just got through, I got awarded every spring break with my children and a 4-week vacation with them every summer, on top of, just sharing time during the year. I got given this extra time with them, and it's very exciting for me because I have a lot of relatives that live far away in other countries and other states, and I would love to just go on all these adventures with the boys this year and take full advantage of this time that I've been rewarded to go spend with them. At the same time, this little sort of thought kept popping up when I tried to make plans for going on these big adventures. Sometimes they were really pragmatic sort of considerations that would pop up and sort of step in the way of these plans that I wanted to make, such as, oh, well, I want to get plane tickets for everyone, but I'm an alien, I'm a resident alien, a permanent resident alien here in the United States, and I've got to do this whole renewal process on that resident alien status this year. How long is that going to take? Who knows, right? It's a governmental agency that I've got to deal with. Is it going to be there in time for me to book a plane ticket with confidence, knowing that I'll have the requisite paperwork in hand in order to step onto that flight with my little boys? I really don't know. Probably, yes, in theory, maybe, but it just left me that, and knowing that this was a hermit year that we're going into has left me going, hold on, hold back. Maybe after the year I've just had, it would be best to just do things a bit closer to home with that time this year, to really firm up some bonding experiences right here, to have people come to me a little more this year might be a better move. And that just feels more aligned with the energy of the year for me. Likewise, if you have an endeavor that you've been waiting to start that might have a few steps, and you might, be sort of presented with a choice if you think about it. What do you do first? Do you do a whole lot of outreach first? Or do you do something that requires more time, personally, alone? There might be different aspects of one project, different tasks in one project that seems to be in front of you, where you could choose to do one or the other. I would choose the ones with a bit more solitude to do first this year. Anything that seems to carry this energy of the hermit is probably the best thing to do. Likewise, if you are even presented with, just sort of where to go in life and how to live your life and any choices that befall you this year, perhaps a choice to, move to one place or another. Do you want to move this year to a big city or to a tiny little village? I would go, in absence of any other information, which, we can probably talk about in private session if you want more personalized information, but just going on the entire energy at play in 2025, I would opt for the little village. If you were to, have an opportunity to go work for a really big company versus a small, more intimate family business, I would choose the smaller one overall. These aren't overarching decisions that I would make without any other information at all, but that would be something that I would definitely bring to bear in any decision that was going to be, before me. And hopefully, at the end of 2025, when you're looking back on 2025, just like we did a short while ago on 2024, the things that you'll be able to celebrate and find gratitude for in 2025 will be those experiences that led you deeper into that journey of the self, into that journey into self-knowledge, and shining your own light in your life. So that overall, very generally, is the energy that is going to come into play in 2025. I'm going to briefly touch on, a deeper exercise that you can do, that I would invite each of you to do if you would like to look at this very simple forecasting tool and see what else you can do with it. And this might be something that some of you know how to go about doing and some of you don't. So I'm going to try to explain it very quickly, but in a way that is going to make sense and be easy to follow along. So I have a series of workshops actually, and if you sign up right now for my Tarot for Beginners class, you get some bonuses that include a series of 2 online workshops called the Destiny Discovery program that I run. In the Destiny Discovery program, I show people how to calculate your birth cards based basically on the same cross-sum calculation method that we just did to take the cross-sums of 2024 and then 2025 to find this overarching archetype for the year in general. You can do this as a personal exercise by looking at your birth date. You can take the cross-sum of your birth date and arrive at a few numbers between 0 and, between 1 and 21, essentially, and find corresponding major arcana tarot archetypes that have special resonance in your life, in your soul path in this lifetime. So, for instance, just to use my own birth date, I was born on July 30th, 1977. So, I can take 0 plus 7 plus 3 plus 0 plus 1 plus 9 plus 7 plus 7, add all of that up, you get 34, and then you take the cross sum of that, 3 plus 4 equals 7. The number 7 archetype in the tarot is the Chariot. Right, so what you can do for any birth date is you can take the cross sum of it via that calculation, and we go into the details of this as well as the resulting archetypes and what they might mean in terms of your personality and your life path in a very similar forecasting way to that which you might enjoy in an astrological reading, only this is a numerological reading using tarot archetypes as those numerological results. We look at all of that in the Destiny Discovery program, which you can get as a bonus when you sign up for Tarot for Beginners. But you can also then take your birth card information and add it in to the cross-sum number for the year. So this is the example that I've written out underneath here for you. The year 2025, for anyone like myself who has a birth card of the Chariot, which is number 7, would also have a correlation to number 16, because 9, the cross sum of 2025, plus 7, the cross sum number associated with my birth, equals 16. So in addition to this being a hermit year overall, for me as a Chariot birth personality, I also have to look at it having a resonance with an archetype known as the Tower. This is really good for me to know that this is coming up, right? As you can see from the image I've got on the screen there, the Tower doesn't look like it's a very rosy, positive feeling card for a lot of people. Fortunately for me, 1 plus 6, the numbers in 16, also equals 7. So there is a cross-sum relationship between 7 and 16, which basically means that I've been dealing with tower energy my whole life. This essentially means I am very versed in big change. I've had a lot of big change in my life from very early years. I was an immigrant as a child, as a teenager. So I had all the transition of my teenage years plus all the transition of immigration coupled together. Very, very tower personality start in life, if you think about it. And it's really sort of been... essentially, the tower has come up over and over again in my life with big changes. So, surprise, surprise for me, I saw this and said, oh, well, the tower might be coming up again this year. But knowing what I've just known, I've just had this year of strengthening, as we all have in 2024. And this year is, all about hermit energies. What my chariot nature and self can add to that hermit energy, sort of equaling a bit of tower energy, to me means the focus here is probably going to be that any big change in my life is going to be in the cause of getting me into that hermit energy more, right? Strengthening and then becoming more of myself. Shoring up my own resources from within before I look without for the answers. I have to look within, as do we all. So for myself personally, this might mean a bit of tower energy comes into play here in order to get me to that goal. What can I do about this? Well, I can prepare, right? Can you prepare for big upheaval and big change? Absolutely. To a certain extent. There are always going to be some things about big upheavals and change that might take us by surprise. But can you be prepared? Can you make sure that your loved ones have your vital information on hand? Can you make sure that you haven't put all your eggs in one basket, whether that be financially or with work situations, etc. I've really diversified in those ways. So whatever this year is going to throw at me in order to get me the hermit's goals more active in my life, I can prepare for, knowing that this energy might come up. Again, this is one of those things we can definitely talk about more. If anyone wants to book a personal reading with me, we can do that. You can certainly also have a look at the Destiny Discovery program that is included along with Tarot for Beginners. If you want to get a hold of that, you can go to my website and find that information. But this is a way that you can use whatever your birth card is, and just sort of do one more calculation and get a little bit more information on what this year might have in store for you. This is just an example using my own birth data, but obviously, there are many different birth card combinations that play out from adding up your birthdays or anyone else's birthday that would be different from this. So let's go ahead and finish up here. I know this has certainly gone a little bit longer than I thought it was going to be. I hope you got a lot of insight out of this class, and I guess it's almost a full-length class that we've just done together. It's a very basic idea, and you can do this for any year. You can actually do this for any date as well, and arrive at a tarot archetype of the major arcana. Each major arcana is numbered. The Fool is numbered 0, but other than the Fool, you've got numbers 1 through 21 in the major arcana of the tarot. And these cards are very useful, insightful tools that you can use to meditate and really get some tremendous insights on what a year or even a specific date might have in store for you. If you would like to go further and learn a little bit more about the tarot, about how I work with the tarot, you can visit my main website is healingwiththearchetypes.com. You can also follow me on Facebook. If you just search Laura Kirkendale on Facebook, my page will come up. Thank you so much for joining me. Happy New Year, everyone, and have a great celebration wherever this life takes you this year, and find something again to celebrate about this old year that we are leaving in gratitude. Thanks so much again. Talk soon.